Today we're talking to Taylor Morabito, the co-owner of Friend of a Farmer, which is a family-owned and operated pioneer in the farm-to-table movement. Friend of a Farmer has two restaurant locations in Manhattan, one in Gramercy Park and the other one in the Upper West Side. Taylor, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Cool. So you guys are you're our first restaurateur guest, and I'm really looking forward to understanding more about the farm-to-table movement and Friend of a Farmer's role in bringing it to the mainstream. So let's jump into
Yeah,
questions.
absolutely.
First, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and the history of Friend of a Farmer, which I see was established in 1986. So tell us, how did this come to be in present day?
Yeah, so I guess we'll start at the beginning. My mom was the founder of Friend of a Farmer, all the way back in 1986. Uh, she and my dad actually were living upstate at the time, and she had this idea of opening up what was then a very small bakery. And she had this passion for jarring fruits and jams while she was living upstate. So she had this very sort of young, new, fresh concept of taking that local produce and those local jams from upstate New York and bringing them down to her bakery in Manhattan. Almost 40 years ago, farm to table was not a thing. So it was very new. No one had ever heard of that before. And from there, she really found almost immediate success. I think like a week or two after opening her doors, the New York Times happened to come in and they wrote her up, gave her a great review. And the next day, lying down the block, my dad had to leave his job doing construction to help her. And we've just grown substantially from a small little bakery to a restaurant that seats over 100 people in Gramercy Park, then obviously with the addition of the Upper West Side. So it's been a passion project for her and my dad, and now me and my siblings for the entirety of our lives. I've been working in the restaurant business since I was a kid. I've been a busboy, a dishwasher. I've been on the line. I've bartended. I've held pretty much every position there is. So it's something that's in my blood at this point, and something that I'm very comfortable with, and something that I feel very passionate and knowledgeable about. So it's certainly been a journey, and being in a family business certainly has its ups and downs. It makes for interesting dinner conversation every once in a while. But yeah, it's been a lot of fun, and it's been a really great learning experience for sure.
So some of my later questions, Taylor, were going to be around like, how did you guys get going? What did the first 6 months look like? But it seems like you had like a super boon right at the very beginning that kicked off this whole project that, as you said, was a passion project, but turned into a legitimate business very quickly.
Yeah, I don't think it was something that was ever really expected. I think when my mom opened, she just sort of anticipated having this little bakery, this little 8 to 10 seater Manhattan bakery essentially that she felt very passionate about and that could bring her some success. I don't think she ever saw it turning into what it is today, which is essentially becoming this pioneer in the farm to table movement in Manhattan. And now, like I said, almost 40 years later, we're still finding such incredible success. Something I think we're all very, very fortunate about.
No, that's really cool. And you must be super proud having built this as a family as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the fact it's remained within my family, and the fact that, throughout the years, obviously I came on board, and then my younger brother and my younger sister, I'm the eldest of three. It's really nice. I mean, being able to lean on people that, you can trust, and they can trust you in return. It's certainly beneficial, I think, for the business, and it certainly keeps our family closer than probably other families that don't have the opportunity to work with one another in a business setting. It has its ups and downs. We certainly have our arguments like any other family. It's just sometimes it's about business and it's not so much about each other. So it keeps things interesting for sure.
That's funny. Can you talk to us, just for anybody out there who doesn't understand or hasn't heard of, or maybe just to clarify, what is the farm to table movement?
Yeah. So for us, we try and source our ingredients locally whenever possible. COVID, well, post-COVID made that much more difficult with inflation and a huge supply on certain goods. But it's something we still strive for. Even with our bar, we source all New York State liquors and spirits. You know, we still have other items as well if people inquire or maybe want them while they're eating here. But we really try and present, you know, on our menu, whether it's at the bar or whether it's someone ordering food, you know, that all of our fruits and vegetables, our meats are from New Jersey. We just, it's something we've always been passionate about, and it's really how we were founded. So we just really try and hammer that home whenever we can.
That's fantastic. And can you just talk a little bit about the environmental benefits to farm to table?
Yeah, for us, it's just limiting your footprint
Hmm.
and sourcing local. I mean, if you, it doesn't really matter where you are, obviously, but if you go to your local market or whatever, a local candle shop, that owner or that person is bringing in those goods from a place that's within whatever it might be, 100-mile radius, as opposed to shopping from a big box store like Walmart or Target. You know, those are brands that are bringing in these massive trucks, which expend a ton of gas, and they have to travel across the country, so their footprint is huge. So for us, it's really about just limiting that footprint and trying to be as local and sustainable as we possibly can.
That makes sense. And then how
Yep.
can you talk about, is it you in the business or somebody else that you've had to do this? You've got to maintain like a huge network of local folks, producers, agriculture and animal farmers, just folks who produce it from wineries, I'm sure alcohol, everything. How, if somebody is thinking of doing this for the first time or wants to incorporate this into their existing business, how do you go about cultivating that network?
Yeah, it's challenging. I think look, when you source local or organic, unfortunately, it's always going to be more expensive than if you don't. And in business, that's a hurdle that we're constantly having to jump over. So for us being in the business for as long as we have thankfully cultivated like a lot of good partnerships with people. You know, we get our cheese from a neighborhood cheese shop. It's literally two doors down.
Hmm.
So we're picking up that cheese by foot, essentially. Now, sometimes that cheese may not be local, but we're reducing our economic footprint by actually walking there and picking it up as opposed to relying on a car or a truck to come and deliver it to us. So over the years, we've benefited from establishing and keeping these partnerships with a lot of these local, whether it's the cheese shop or whether it's a farm in New Jersey. We get our meat from this place called Fossil Farm that we've worked with for the past 5 or 10 years. You know, and you build that rapport, you build that partnership, and over time, they're able to maybe reduce the price a little bit for you because they're able to see that, you know, you are a successful brand, and they are willing to do what they can to keep that partnership alive. So I think it's something that's nurtured over time. I don't think it's something that really happens overnight, at least not for us.
Mm. Okay, that makes sense. And you mentioned that, you know, a lot of our listeners are entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs, business owners that are really firmly in the committed to sustainability and furthering sustainability in their business practices however they can. And you mentioned at the start of that response about how this is going to be more expensive. If you're committed to sourcing things locally, produce, it's going to be a little bit more expensive. In your experience or with your experience, is there any, you know, is it just buying in bulk? Is there any way to make farm to table as a concept more affordable, or is it, you know, is it just the volume, the quantity, again, cultivating those relationships over time to get discounts where possible when you see what's working? Is there anything else that you could recommend?
Yeah, I think anybody else that might be in the restaurant business may understand this, maybe in other businesses as well. But whenever obviously you buy in bulk, you're going to see bigger discounts. And for us, we're fortunate enough where we are very busy and we do have that volume, and it allows us to buy certain products in bulk. But
Hmm.
the flip side to that is there are certain products that are, you know, very expensive, and even if you do buy in bulk, unfortunately, there aren't any discounts. So it's sort of for us navigating through our menu and saying, all right, well, what can we do where can we apply, our business model as far as being local and sustainable? What items can we bring in? What can we afford? And I had mentioned earlier, before COVID, it was a lot easier. Prices were more, you were able to digest them a little easier. But COVID certainly has created more of a challenge as far as finding those products at a price that is affordable and is not just sustainable for the environment, but also sustainable for business as well.
All right. And you mentioned COVID. Can you talk to us? What was the COVID experience for Friend of a Farmer?
It was scary.
Mm,
Manhattan in general was really scary. We were forced into a shutdown, as many were, in March, and we closed our doors until I think the end of May. We were able to reopen and start seating people outside. We essentially tore the entire, I mean, metaphorically, we tore the restaurant completely down. We started
mm-hmm.
from ground zero. I mean, we were a 100-seat restaurant, and we had to restart with just outdoor seating. We had a very small crew of people that helped us get off the ground again. I think we had like 20 seats outside. It was really weird. I mean, finding purveyors and vendors that were open, that were even willing to ship us goods. It was essentially like restarting and reopening a brand new business, even though we had been open for so long. And unfortunately, a lot of restaurants around us closed. I think 30 or 40% of restaurants in Manhattan and bars, excuse me, in Manhattan, closed for good. And it was a sad time for sure to be a restaurateur and see a lot of familiar places close down.
Yeah, just tremendous numbers in terms of folks who weren't able to weather the shutdown for sure. Is there anything that I don't want to say kind of a silver lining, but was there anything that you were able to accelerate or that turned out to be a blessing in disguise with COVID?
Um, I think we were able to really pull things apart on our menu and within
Mm,
our operation and sort of see what worked and what didn't. And I think we were able to streamline things a little more efficiently. So we were able to find some pockets of success during those few years where things were very much upside down. And even with, our relationships with those partners, that we've cultivated all those years prior to COVID, I think getting through it together, I think strengthened those partnerships and those
mm-hmm,
bonds.
mm-hmm.
And coming out on the other side, sort of hand in hand, was certainly it was a really nice feeling and sort of a proud moment, I think, for a lot of us.
That's one thing that's really cool about having such a close network of partners is you have them for so long, and this is one thing that I hear from entrepreneurs that I talk to a lot. When you have those partners and you cultivated those relationships and you just know each other, so you've got those good strong business ties and you care about that business being in business or not, or succeeding, and how you can help each other. I heard a lot of those kind of stories getting through COVID. So that must be the same for this like amazing network of a producer that you guys have set up as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And not even just with vendors, but our small little block in Manhattan, there's
Mm-hmm.
restaurants and shops and bars around, and thankfully all of us, made it through. There's a handful of us, and we all know each other really well. We see each other pretty much every day, whether it's on our way to work, or maybe one of us will pop by for a drink or a bite to eat. So it was a nice feeling, our little small community of bars and restaurants and shops, the fact we were able to pull through together. It was really wonderful.
That's awesome. And then let's talk about the Manhattan restaurant scene kind of in general. How has that changed besides there just being many fewer venues available? How has that changed or evolved since the pandemic?
Well, in Manhattan now you have, and I'm sure there are other cities across the U.S. maybe that have this too, but you have these outdoor, they're called outdoor structures essentially. There's some that are on the sidewalk, and then most are in the street. And the city allowed restaurants to build these. Essentially, they're they're almost like homes or sheds that are in the street, and they allowed for restaurants to have outdoor dining and expand their seating so that they could survive during the pandemic when the city was not allowing any indoor dining whatsoever. And that those structures have carried over. They still exist. We still have
Mm.
ours. So that has been one of the major differences that occurred because of COVID. And then obviously there were all these regulations and laws that were passed while we were still sort of navigating through the pandemic. But now I have to tell you, in Manhattan, it seems very normalized. It does seem like things are back to normal. We're back at full capacity. I mean, you may still see people wearing a mask every once in a while indoors, but it does feel as though this year, more so than any other year, that things are more or less back to normal.
And do you feel like a warm reception? Do you feel that same camaraderie amongst customers as well? Are they just like still? I'm based in London, and as soon as the lockdown went, it was just like people were so happy to go support their local coffee shops or restaurants, and that feeling kind of still feels like it persists today, even a couple years later. Is that the same? Do you feel that just energy from customers as well?
Yeah, especially in the beginning, it was. We have a lot of regulars and a lot of local guests that come in pretty frequently, and so for us, it was great to see them, and I think for them, it was great to see us. So yeah, I think it's still there. I think it's been nice to see. I think maybe it has faded a little bit, but it is something that still comes up. It's still something that's spoken about because it was such an unbelievable, obviously, time
Mm-hmm.
in our history.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, in the beginning, it certainly was very much there, and it was definitely it was encouraging. It gave us, the drive to want to do this and provide an outlet because I mean everyone was stuck indoors for a while, so to be able
Mm-hmm.
to open up our doors again for people so they could escape was certainly nice.
Nice. And when did you guys open that second location?
So that second location is we're supposed to open actually in the next few weeks.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not open just yet. We're hoping to open in the middle of the summer, maybe mid-July. But that one should be open very soon.
Nice. And then, so
Yeah.
if you're opening a second location, that must mean that the concept to farm to one, I'm sure it's just like excellent food, but the concept must have evolved farm to table as a concept. Can you talk about how that has evolved in just consumers' eyes or maybe their familiarity with the concept over the last, let's say, 10 years?
Yeah, I think I feel like people are more educated and more sort of aware of what they're eating and where they're eating and where their food comes from. And I feel as though maybe social media has a lot to do with that. The internet has a lot to do with that. We have more access to information now, which of course has helped us being that we are farm to table. So I think that's probably been the biggest, most positive change, at least from what I've seen. It just seems as though where we are now as a larger community versus where we were 20 years ago in regards to what we eat, even things like gluten free or non-dairy milk. Those things didn't really, no one knew what those things were 15
Mm-hmm.
years ago. When I was
Mm-hmm.
in high school, everyone just drank whole milk or skim milk.
Mm-hmm.
There was no oat milk in my cafeteria.
Mm-hmm.
um so I just think now it's almost like common practice. If you don't have those things, if you don't have them available, it's almost like what are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
So that's been a really positive change. I think it's been great to see.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, when I was a kid, farm to table, it like I didn't grow up in a city, but farm to table was just kind of like life. And as you
Yeah,
said, there was not, the idea of gluten free was non-existent, and milk that was not, unless you had some like you were lactose intolerant, like the idea of non-dairy milk was just not a thing. Yeah, so
right.
yeah, it's especially interesting to see, and this is what we're here for sure, is to see how consumers are so vocal now in voting with their dollars about in terms of what they put in their mouth, the impact on the environment, impact on other people, fair trade and wages, and just ethical practices, how mainstream that has become as a concept, which is really nice.
Yeah, it's been super nice to see, and it's really important. And I think, like you said, it's really nice to see that people are taking note of all those things.
Yeah. So you guys also have expanded since the opening way back in 86 to another brand, Suey Smokehouse Barbecue.
Yep, yep. That's a very different brand indeed. We opened that one. I think we opened it about 5 years ago, 6 years ago. We opened Stewie's.
Cool. And where's that located?
Um, that's in Long Island. It's about this town called Locust Valley, which is actually where I'm from. It's like 45 minutes east of the city, I'd say, with no traffic.
Is that ever a thing? No traffic?
Not anymore. It's not. Regardless of time, it's there's always plenty of cars on the road.
Yeah.
So yeah, normally it's an hour and 20 to get out there, unfortunately.
But you've got the two locations and you manage also this third, the Smokehouse Barbecue. So what does your day look like?
It varies. I try and plan for the day, and the day always ends up just taking over on its own. You walk into a restaurant and there's a million and one things that are always going on. Some good, some bad. There's always little fires that are having to be put out. So it varies. Some days I'm at the restaurant till 5 or 6. Last week I was here till midnight because I had to close. Other days I will shoot out to Stewie's and see what's going on out there. So it varies day to day, week to week. It's always different, and I feel lucky because it keeps me passionate and very much involved because it certainly isn't mundane. It's always changing, and that's an exciting part of the job.
And now that you're kind of managing a lot of the admin and you're in the leadership and the direction and strategy of the companies, do you miss the operational activity? Do you like miss rolling your sleeves up and like bartending or bussing or talking to customers, or do you get to sometimes do that? As you said, there's fires every day that need to be put out. Do you get to jump back in and do some of that stuff as well?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it happens a lot. I'm on the floor when I can be. I, I bartended for quite a few years, and that's certainly a passion of mine. Making cocktails. I actually got certified as a sommelier like when I was 25. So I have a passion for wine and beverage. Those sort of things. They light the fire a little bit and keep me going. And those are the fun parts of the job, being able to hop behind the bar, talking to customers, a lot of our regulars, people that have known me honestly for the majority of my life, seeing them every once
Hmm.
in a while. It's definitely fun, and I'm very grateful that I'm still able to do those things.
That's cool. And
Yeah.
besides opening up that second location sometime this summer, what do the rest of your plans look like for 2023?
Hopefully gonna take a vacation towards the end of summer when things slow down, depending on how the new location goes. But for the most part, I think it will revolve around getting that new location off the ground. It's going to take a lot of work and a lot of time, a lot of patience. So I'm already cultivating the mindset that I'll be working a lot for the rest of the year. So I think that'll probably be it for the remainder of 23, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's all right. That's an exciting project, though. Opening another
It, it,
location must be super cool.
Absolutely. I shouldn't say unfortunately. I'm very fortunate to be able to to open up another location, especially in Manhattan.
So, because we don't have video on this, I know you're sitting in the restaurant, but can you just describe to customers and guess what can you expect when you walk into Friend of a Farmer? What does it look like and feel like?
Yeah, so for us, the atmosphere is as important as the food. We really spend a lot of time and a lot of effort in creating an experience when you walk in. So when you walk in, there's this floral tapestry on the wall. There's these unbelievable wooden beams, wooden floors. It feels like you've stepped outside the city and you've actually transported yourself to a country home in Vermont or maybe France or maybe even somewhere outside of London somewhere. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know, but
Mm-hmm.
we have working fireplaces. It's a very warm and homey feeling, and you know that first moment when you step in and then sit down, it's an experience that sort of evolves while you're here, from the service to the food. It's really a unique and very much a special experience for sure.
Wonderful. Well, I'm excited to visit next time I'm in New York City.
Yeah, you'll have to, absolutely.
So this is now we're at kind of the rapid fire portion of our podcast where we ask our guests the same four or five questions. So the first one is, since you've seen this, literally you've seen this business, this is, as you said, in your DNA, this has been your whole life. What do you feel has been the biggest success to date?
The biggest success to date, I think for us getting through COVID
Mm-hmm.
was very paramount, and there were just so many unanswered questions every day. It was just we didn't know if we were going left or if we were going right. The city didn't know what direction just no one had any answers.
Mm-hmm.
And I think now almost going into 2024, almost 4 years later, I think it's easy to kind of put that in the rear view and maybe forget about it, but it's still something I think about, and I think for us that was a really challenging time, and the fact we were able to get out on the other side of it, especially in Manhattan, which is already competitive enough as it is. I think that is probably most currently our biggest story to date.
Yeah, that is not a small feat for anybody, any kind of restaurant with a physical shop, anything, having survived COVID, getting on the other side and still being able to stay in the game. That's not nothing. That makes sense. Um, and on the flip side of that coin, what would you consider to be your biggest failure to date?
Um, I think as a business, we had opened a restaurant in Brooklyn Heights in 2016 or 2017, and it just never took off. The concept didn't work, and that was a tough pill to swallow because we took a lot of time to try and make that work, and I think as a business that was certainly our biggest failure. Um, there are other things too, as far as trying to stay sustainable. I hate to keep bringing up COVID, but I think there were some other little failures along the way with trying to do what we did prior, which was being almost completely local. That hurt us a little bit in the beginning because we couldn't find, vendors that really aligned with what we did. So maybe stepping out of who we are just so we could keep the business together more or less. That
Mm-hmm.
maybe not so much a failure, but more so just a challenge and maybe a subtle change in identity for a moment. Those that was difficult to swallow as well, I think.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. And then if it's different, this might be the same thing. What is the most important lesson you feel like you've learned today?
The most important lesson I think is just, you know, for what we do and just being a business in general, I think is just being patient and taking your time and trying to find uh, the right approach, whether it's finding a new vendor or a new farm to work with, finding the right product, finding the right location. I think patience in business is a virtue. Things don't happen overnight. They take a lot of time and a lot of hard work, and sometimes it takes years. But I think remaining patient, remaining vigilant can I think you're more likely to find success that way, and that's something I've learned over the past few years for sure.
That's an interesting one. So you are um, a business owner in arguably one of the most fast-paced cities in the world, and your biggest and most important lesson is patience.
Yeah, I think it's important. I think when people hear about businesses that are successful, a lot of the time they don't know the back end or the inside
Mm-hmm.
scoop as to how
Mm-hmm.
much work or effort they've been putting into it, and then you dive into who they are, what they've done, and you realize, wow, they've been working on this for 2, 3, 4, 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes time. And I think, not getting frustrated and having that patience to succeed, it's a challenge. And I think having it is very important.
Yeah, that's a good one. If you could get 85% of the world to adopt a single behavior, what would it be?
Buy local,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
obviously. There's so many benefits to buying local. obviously the most obvious is you reduce your economic footprint. The shop owner goes out, they reduce their economic footprint because people are buying their product. And it's nice to just invest in your own community, and you meet people, and you're able to just, you're directly impacting your immediate community, and the environment is also benefiting from it. I think to me, that's certainly the most important.
I really like that one. That is one of B1's pillars. And then where can we find you?
So you can find us. Currently, we're in Gramercy Park on Irving Place. That's that's the baby, as we say. We have our barbecue shop out on Long Island in Locust Valley, and then the Upper West Side on 71st Street is slated to open in July.
Cool. And then for everybody who is not in the area, online presence?
Yeah, yeah. You can find us on Instagram at Friend of a Farmer. We have a website, friendofafarmer.com. So we're very, very easy to find.
Cool. Taylor, thank you very much for chatting with us today. If you're in Manhattan, for the audience members, be sure to stop by Friend of a Farmer. From this summer, you'll be able to visit 2 locations. Thank you very much for chatting with us, Taylor.
Thanks so much. It was a lot of fun.
And everybody else in the audience, we'll see you on B1.